Hey, welcome to The Process. My name is Dr. John Bush. This is Science of Fantasy Football is where I hang out. It's where me and my co-partner in crime, D Mike, do podcasts and lots of data and experiments. And this is the second part of my snaps report for this week. I didn't want to do it all 60, 70 slides all at one time. This is a segue into a side aspect of this research. I kind of came upon this, and I'm not sure what this is yet. So that's part of fantasy football research. Sometimes you go down an alley and hey, this is interesting. And so I'm just reporting this, and I'll be watching this. There's lots of other stuff I'm watching. And I'm not sure I understand exactly the depth of what this is. But anyway, I was considering team average player snaps. In other words, if you just take the team, take all the players and average their snaps, there is a difference amongst the team. And then I said, well, does this have any relationship to the team's yards per game? Okay, so is there some way to transform snaps at the player level into the team level yards per game? Is there some interaction? And this may be for next year's preseason research. I don't know. This may be predictive for, daily fantasy sports betting. I don't quite know what it's all about. So yes, the professor's saying he doesn't know. It's just interesting. You'll see what I mean when we go through this. So anyway, that is this report. It's not very long, but I did want to throw it out just to show my process, right? Sometimes I run across things. Sometimes I run across things and I don't report it. I call it secret stuff. And sometimes if it seems really interesting, but this, I don't even know where the journey ends on this, so it's hard for me to visualize, and maybe that makes it important. There's my dog. So I compared the team yards per game with team average player snaps weeks 1 and 2. So I made a ratio. A lot of times in research, if you take two data streams and make a ratio between the two, just divide one by the other, that can reveal potential interactions. I know people do correlation, that's fine. We're not to that point yet. And if you have multiple data streams, you're doing things like multiple regression or logistic regression, depending on the nature of the variables. But right now, I just wanted to do this. Right? That's why I love to work for myself, because I can do what I want. And I don't care if it's relevant or not, or, generates clickbait. I don't care. Okay? So, when we look at this, we definitely see a distribution, and the best is 13.6 yards per game divided by average player snap, and the worst is 7.6. So there is the floor and the floor and then the ceiling, and most everybody's about 9.9, almost 10 yards per game versus average player snaps. So this is the actual data, the team, the average player snaps, yards per game, and then there's the ratio here. Okay, and I plotted that ratio. And I look at the top and the bottom, and I made note of the teams. And when I looked at the names, Miami, Kansas City, Seattle, Buffalo, Chargers, Denver's a little surprising. The Raiders definitely surprising. Green Bay, Detroit, Atlanta, those seem to be some of the better better teams. So anytime you start seeing a distinction there, because look at the bottom. Giants, Washington, Phillies, Arizona, Pittsburgh. So let's see, New England, of course, Cincinnati, with all their troubles, they're at the bottom. So it's like, this is kind of mirroring what's happening right now in these data streams if you use this ratio. So the question I had, let's plot these two data streams. So when you plot them, the red triangles are the yards per game, and you plot, and this is from Miami all the way to Cincinnati, you start seeing kind of, and this is a polynomial, so we see some extremes and a general downward trend. If we look at average player snaps, we kind of see a low to a high. So it seems to be an inverse relationship. And anytime I see an X on data, then there's a story there, I think. I mean, it's 2 weeks, I think. So there's something there that is inverse. Yards per game versus average player snap. Why is that so different? So I'm not sure I understand it either, but I definitely wanted to present it to those that are, doing their own research. And part of it, if I didn't present it, then I'd probably forget about it. So it'd be gone. If you get to be in your 60s, things start slipping away a little bit. And so there it is. And I said, well, is there any difference in the distribution of the players getting snaps total in the team? In other words, teams have a lot of players getting snaps or fewer players. Is there any kind of positional, like are there a lot of running backs, a lot of wide receivers? Is there something we can nail down to maybe explain what's going on? And if we can predict, obviously, yards per game, certainly even, preseason, that certainly gives you teams to kind of mine in drafting and daily fantasy sports, etc., betting, whatnot. I mean, Vegas, and you could probably turn this into something. So is this based on something? I mean, it's suggestive. It's hard for me to imagine the mechanism here of what's going on. So I just wanted to end with the data that I had at this point. So player counts, positional counts, and percentages. And what I did was I colorized the teams. Yellow were the in high, red were the low ones. Okay. And right away, if you look at the grand total of players getting snaps, 25 to 28 players level, you see that you're at the top of this. And notice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 out of the 10. So 70% of the high yards per game teams are in this group. So I'm narrowing down the better teams, and a lot of those teams have a lot of players compared to the other players' numbers. So there seems to be something there. It's telling you something. I would have predicted the opposite, but that's just me. So notice in the top, you have 3 losers out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you have 9. So roughly 40% losers up here. That means 60% not. So 60% double the winners here. And look below at about 22 here or so. It really is bad. So does this mean you have more talented players? Is this what we're catching here? Is this a way to catch it? Kind of finding the goodness and, figuring out the players. So this is what it's showing. I looked at the numbers of running backs, tight ends, and wide receivers. And if you see, there's a lot of these that are pretty high in wide receivers, but they're also high in the tight end and some in the running back. And down at the bottom, we don't see a lot of wide receivers there compared. Okay, they're not stained green there. There's not any running backs here, folks. None. So there's a lack of running backs on these teams. And there's a lack of wide receivers down at the bottom. I looked at position, and I'm not sure I'm finding anything here. There's a lot of running backs, though. If you look in the top, you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 teams with 30% or better, and 90% of those teams are in the tops. So is that focusing something? That we have a lot of running backs on these teams, and the low teams, the teams that are not doing things, don't have a lot. So is that a way to kind of zero in on the higher power teams? Is just the number of running backs getting snaps, which is kind of intuitive because in fantasy we want one running back to get everything, right? And this is kind of saying teams probably shouldn't do that. They should probably have a lot of running backs that are snap worthy, maybe during goal line, maybe during third down, maybe a pass catcher. In other words, kind of a lot of those higher level situational running backs. Is that a way to judge a team? Is numbers of total players and numbers of running backs that have a role. Okay, it's not 100% perfect, but boy, it's very suggestive, this data, especially the running back and the totals. It's very suspicious, folks. So on occasion, I will try to come back to this. I'm not sure I understand the whole thing here. But you get to see the data before I figured it out. But right now, after 2 weeks, there's some suggestions of something. So when you see something like this, it tells you need to keep following this. You need to probably do it for multiple years. And you need to kind of back test it to see, using 2022 data, was this predictive of what happened in 2023? In other words, can we make some predictions year to year? So I've got the database 2013. So I could come and run this, right? So you do reverse data and then forward data on it in a beta test. So I thought this was important enough people may want to consider. So what does that mean for Houston, for instance, has nice running backs, has a lot of snap players. So maybe Houston's better than we think. Carolina and Cincinnati don't have a lot of running backs, but they have a lot of players getting snaps. So maybe those teams are going to do better than they've done. I don't know. Maybe Houston. I mean, it's just good to figure this out. Okay, that's all I got to say about this. I give you a window into what happens when you find something you don't even know what it means, and wasn't looking for this at all. Did not go down this pathway at all. So I just wanted to give you an example of this kind of research, and you definitely should check out my lessons preseason. Obviously next year now. It's a little too late for this year. I mean, you can go back and see what I put out there, and see if you think it is worthy of you looking next year. Okay, thanks for listening. I've got 2 other parts coming, usage, and then at the player level, all 32 teams. That's going to take a while. Okay, I'm trying to get that out this Friday, 9/22. Woo woo.